Big thanks to all the sponsors who made this conference possible. Yeah, the subject of our session is Power BI and Azure DevOps, better together. So as I said, I know it's early in the morning, but let me start with questions to you. Who uses Power BI on regular basis? Okay, thank you. Who is familiar with DataOps, DevOps concepts? Okay, great. And who uses Power BI and Azure DevOps together on regular basis? Okay, that's what I expected. So it makes perfect sense to continue the session. So this slide is probably not very important, as you still will not be able to say who is who, as we are twin brothers. But I'm Kamil Słomka. I'm Power BI guy. I support global organizations with Power BI architecture, consulting, development, and I provide trainings.
I'm Adrian Słomka. I'm the data architect. Last couple of years, I'm very deep into DevOps and DataOps.
So we will start our session with introduction to DevOps and DataOps concepts. Then we will talk how do we approach publishing content in Power BI regarding self-service and enterprise scenarios. The main part of the session will be a live demo, and then we will show you how we did the setup of the environment to make Azure DevOps and Power BI working together. And finally, final thoughts, what you can do more about this topic.
DevOps and DataOps, especially DevOps. I know everybody heard DevOps. Most of you heard DataOps, yeah? But the question is, are they the same? Is DataOps just DevOps for data analytics? Let's try to discuss this issue. Yeah. The very important thing I would like you to take from that slide is that DevOps is not the same as Azure DevOps. If you are using boards in Azure DevOps, you are not DevOps organization yet. My experience in data warehousing, data analytics says one thing. We, data people, are, let's say, weak in CI/CD DevOps processes. Throughout whole my career, I was missing proper DevOps setup for basically all my projects in whole my life. That's why a couple of years ago, I interested a bit in DevOps. After having a lot of conversation with DevOps engineers, I have realized that I'm not missing exactly DevOps, yeah? Because DevOps as a way of working, as a mindset, was created for software engineering. And we, data people, the nature of our work is a bit different than the work done by our colleagues, software engineers. Yeah, we, data people, are addressing a bit different challenges. For example, additional challenge for us in comparison to DevOps engineers working for software engineering is process orchestration. For sure, testing is much more complicated in our case, in data world, yeah? Because when you are testing, building, and later on testing the application, the piece of software during the CI/CD process, during the DevOps pipeline, it's quite common to build, for example, the environment completely from the scratch. In data warehousing scenario, quite often it is a bit hard because of the amount of data. Sometimes it is possible, but for sure it's more challenging than for software engineering.
Okay, how about Power BI? How do we approach publishing content? Okay, we did development and we want to make our content available for end users. So it should reach production environment. For self-service manner, the very basic approach, even simpler than shown in the slide, is to use Power BI workspace as a development area and then publish Power BI app from the workspace as a production. We, as developers, can make changes to our content in the Power BI workspace. When it is tested, we can publish it as an app and users will see the change. Very basic, everyone can do that. No code, just using Power BI service features.
Yeah, this important point to get it from this a bit too complicated schema. Look that here we are not using Azure DevOps at all. If Kamil mentioned pipelines, it's Power BI deployment pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. The approach shown in the slide is to use a bit more complicated, what I described a minute ago. Still, for self-service users, it's possible to have free environments, I mean only free workspaces, instead of just one, development, production, and test. Power BI service offers a feature called Power BI deployment pipelines. It's very easy tool. No code, you can do it with a few clicks. You can achieve it with it? You can move your content from development to test and then to production, comparing changes between environments. But this is for self-service. We will focus on enterprise case as it is more challenging. In that approach, we have, first of all, we have some developers working mostly with Power BI Desktop as a tool to create Power BI content, reports, and datasets. As we want to be mature, we need some code repository. For example, Azure Repo. So, developer finishes his or her work and publishes content to the repo. Then we have Azure DevOps. Everything what is going to happen later will be done automatically. I mean, publishing content to development area, test environment, and production. Doing some tests, approvals, changing connection strings, and so on. Wait a minute. We have a couple of options here, yeah? For Power BI part, we can use still Power BI deployment pipelines to move content between environments. Dev, test, and production. It is not only option. You can do it without Power BI deployment pipelines, which are premium feature. With a bit more effort, you can do it with REST API, which doesn't require Power BI Premium, or you can do it with XML endpoint for datasets, but it requires Premium. Okay, I can see there are some technical issues, but yeah, we can continue. So, we are getting closer to a demo part. This is a setup of our environment. On the left-hand side, we start with some source data. We have two SQL databases. Nothing special here, just keep in mind that we have two databases. One serves development and test purposes, and second one for production. We, or Adrian as a developer, has Power BI Desktop and Visual Studio Code. Power BI Desktop, I think, is meaningful. Visual Studio Code in that scenario can be used to push your changes to code repository. But Adrian is a geek, so probably he will use Git console instead. In Azure DevOps, we have code repository, release and build pipelines, and approvals to verify and approve tests. In Power BI Service, we have 3 workspaces for development, test, and production environments. As we are going to use Power BI deployment pipelines, those workspaces are premium per user. To make it all working, we need on-premises data gateway to connect Power BI dataset from the Power BI service to a local database, and service principal in Azure Active Directory to make it fully automatic. Yeah, let's start the demo.
Okay, so Kamil said I will be acting as a developer. This is partially right. I will be playing more roles, for example, tester, release approver. And the reason is that there are no more Słomka brothers. So I need to play quite a few roles, yeah? So let's start with developer role. Now I will be acting as a Power BI developer. As Kamil mentioned, we will be using Git repository inside Azure DevOps, yeah? Because there is where our report, sales analysis report, is located. I will demonstrate the simplest branching strategy, trunk-based development with feature branches. This is a strategy, yeah? It's not something you need to implement inside Azure DevOps. It's a way of working. There is no single golden scenario, single golden branching strategy, but my personal favorite is that one because it's the simplest one. Trunk-based approach with feature branches. It means that we have only one long living branch. It's main branch, master branch, or whatever, yeah? The key principle here is it is the only long living branch. All builds, and later on all deployments are done from that branch, yeah? As I said, now I will be acting as developer. I'm starting new development, so I need to create new branch, short-lived branch. The purpose of this branch will be to just, take development of very small tasks, yeah? So it's supposed to be a short-lived branch, yeah? Preferably 1, 2, 3 days long at maximum, yeah? Let's call it demo, let's say 10. Yeah, as I mentioned, I guess data people are not best in Git scenarios and so on, but just to be sure, yeah? Git is a distributed control version system. So the branch I created now was created in Azure DevOps services, yeah? Basically speaking, in the cloud, yeah? To make it available on my, basically Kamil's working station on that laptop, I need to pull from the remote repository, yeah? I guess the letters are very small, but the command is that simple. Now the new branch, demo 10, is available. So let's switch. Let's switch to this new branch. Here is my local repository where the old version of the report is stored.
And we have 1 minute break to make Power BI desktop open.
Okay, so in the meantime, we can check the old version of the report, yeah? So this is the base version. We are starting our development with that version of the report. Yeah, this is already deployed to Power BI service.
And this session is not about report design.
And yeah, it's also not about development of Power BI report. So let's keep it simple. Let's simply change the color of the report. The other reason is that basically this is end of my Power BI skills. So okay, so let's say I have finished my development. I'm super satisfied what I have done. What I need to do to start this, DevOps machinery. Yeah? First of all, I need to commit my changes. And as Kamil mentioned, I don't know how to use Visual Studio Code, so I need to work in a console. Yeah, sorry for that. Okay, let's put some comment. Important thing, the commit is a local action. I'm committing to local repository on my laptop, yeah? One file change, so it means I have saved the report. Okay, so to make this change available in the remote repository in Azure Devops repos, I need to initiate git push command, yeah? That's simple. And now I hope that our pipelines build.
Let's Adrian stop for a while. Okay. The main goal of this demo is to make all other things automatical. Yeah, we did development as we do as Power BI developers, but we didn't publish the content manually to Power BI service, even to development environment. All other actions which will happen will be done automatically by Azure DevOps. Yeah, please keep in mind that goal.
That's a very important point because I will be demonstrating, showing you the state of Power BI deployment pipelines, but only for illustration. I will not manually pushing any button inside Power BI deployment pipelines. In other words, you can say that Azure DevOps release pipeline, I will show the code in a couple of seconds, is orchestrating, is triggering the Power BI deployment pipelines. Yeah, so Azure DevOps is orchestrator of Power BI deployment pipeline. As Kamil mentioned in the beginning, this is not the only scenario. You can do a direct deployment using REST API or XML endpoint. Yeah, but in our very simple demo, we are making use of Power BI deployment pipelines, and Azure DevOps is orchestrating them. Yeah, I have pushed my change to remote Git repository, but as you can see, no pipeline is started. And why is that? Fortunately, I expected that. This is the scenario we have implemented. Yeah, to start CI/CD processes, we need to make a pull request to merge the changes from development feature branch into the main. A couple of minutes ago, I said that we have only one long-living main master branch, and yes, builds are done only from that master main branch. Yeah, so I need to merge the changes from my development branch into main branch, and I will make use of pull request to do that. Who has ever used pull request? Okay, I'm a bit surprised that it means that DevOps is becoming more and more popular in data community. Super. Of course, good pull request contains proper title, good description. Of course, we can use Markdown to format the description properly, and of course, good pull request contains some reviewers. Yeah. Unfortunately, Power BI files, PBX files are binary, so that's why we cannot see the changes. We'll refer to that because, basically, I don't want to say proper, but yeah, proper DevOps setup is based on text files kept in the Git repository. And we data people are struggling with those binary files, for example, for Power BI, but those who remember, for integration services packages, it was exactly the same problem. They were XML files, but still hard to track changes, yeah? Okay, I need to approve my own pull request. Of course, it's not good practice. I should ask my colleague or my brother. I'm in convenient situation. I can ask my brother, the older brother, yeah, to do a review. Okay.
It looks fine.
Thank you. I have approved the pull request. Now I need. By a complete action, of course, it will trigger the merge, the most important thing. But of course, I can also mark the other action, which is deletion of development branch. And it's also good practice because, as I mentioned, this development branch is supposed to be short-lived. Once my small development, small chunk, small portion, DevOps is also about that. Deploying frequently, very minor, very small changes, yeah? So let's complete the merge, and let's hope the...
Do we have a question, yeah?
Yes. What about TMDL?
You need to wait 15 minutes.
Yeah, we'll cover that.
Yeah,
topic.
we'll cover that. We'll cover that after the demo. It's not included in the demo, but we have a slides and a couple of sentences to say about that later on, a bit later.
And another question. Since you are working on the entire PDIX files, how do you deal with conflicts? Merge conflicts, or would you try to develop a report at the same time?
Indeed, that's problem. Fortunately, there are some options to keep at least the part of the Power BI file containing data model in text files. We'll cover it a bit later, yeah?
Yeah, what we are presenting is the very basic, the simplest way you can work with Power BI and Azure DevOps. Regarding more complex scenario like merging conflicts, merging files, in major scenarios, probably we will use separate files for report part, for visuals, and JSON, BIM file for storing data model. This is how we can do that to make it even more enterprise scale. We will cover the topic later.
In meantime, I can see our build pipeline has finished. This pipeline is super simple because basically there's nothing to compile because the source of the deployment is already binary file. In the scenario already mentioned, in TDML scenario, we would need to compile something, yeah? And here we are only publishing the artifact, yeah? So this CI or build pipeline is super simple, yeah? Once it is finished, the release pipeline is starting automatically. The deployment to development environment is conducted without any approvals. So let's check the state of development workspace. Indeed, we can see a new version of the report because it's green one. And also we can check the state of Power BI deployment pipeline, just to illustrate, yeah? I'm not going to push any button because you can say Azure DevOps is pushing the buttons, yeah? It's our robot to do the job. But at least we can see the state, yeah? Here we can see some changes because the deployment to dev workspace was conducted, but to test not yet, yeah?
Can I have
Of course.
Could you show the compare on the deployment pipelines? What are the changes? Can you see more about the changes?
For report, no. If the change was made to dataset, to the model part, yeah, it is possible already to see the differences.
Like a text comparison between two different versions, yeah? Only for data model part, yeah? And
But we expect that will be also upgraded. I mean that comparing reports somehow will be possible.
My duty as a developer is to verify the changes deployed to development workspace. Let's say I'm super satisfied with these changes. And yeah, now I'm asking the tester or release manager of test environment to approve the release to UAT environment. Let's approve the release to test environment. Should we go into... Yeah, maybe we should say a couple of words about how the deployment...
Yeah, maybe let's start with pipeline deploying content to development.
Sure. Basically the stage, yeah? This is the stage of the whole release pipeline.
As you can see, this pipeline is quite simple. What we use here is an extension to Azure DevOps called Power BI Actions. It's not a must. You can do all of those things with raw REST API calls. Because this extension is just a wrapper for Power BI service REST APIs. But we use it to make it as simple as possible. The configuration of those steps is really short. You just need to provide an action that you would like to conduct on Power BI content. Here we have upload Power BI report. The source file, as you can see, is provided with some parameters, and we have workspace name. That's it. We have some other actions in the pipeline. We can call them post-deployment. We bind a dataset to a gateway to make it refreshable. And finally, we refresh the dataset. So we do automatically all those actions that are required for publishing and refreshing dataset in the Power BI service.
How many workspaces do you have?
3. Development, test, and production. And basically this is how many Power BI deployment pipelines are covering. If you have a more, let's say, sophisticated scenario, then you need to use a different deployment option.
As we said, Power BI deployment pipelines are not a must. This is one of options.
Yes, exactly. And here, the deployment to test environment is already finished. So now I will be playing a role of UAT tester. So let's go to test workspace. And let's see the report. Yes, great success. We can see a green version of the report. So I'm as a UAT tester, I'm done for today. I'm approving the release, and you know. And here in the UAT stage of the release pipeline, there's a post-deployment approval. Yeah. So my obligation as a UAT tester is to approve these stages. After the approving, let's say, test cases, test scenarios on UAT environment, the action must be taken by release manager, release approver for the production environment. Yeah. Of course, I'm referring to, let's say, quite complex scenarios, very enterprise with a lot of approvals. But I think this is the case for, you know, big companies, big enterprises, yeah, when the duties are spread across among a couple of people, yeah. So let's approve the release to production environment. And as Kamil mentioned, we expect a bit different data in production version of the report because development and test workspaces are using one database in our simple demo, of course, only, yeah? And production report is using a different production dedicated database, yeah? And how this change of connection strings is done?
Yeah, for that purpose, we use Power BI deployments pipelines feature. We can replace the data source connection string with a different value. So we replace test dev database with production one. But once again, it's not only option. For example, if we were deploying the content with BIM file, we can do it with, for example, tabular editor to replace the connection on the fly in the model.
So in this scenario, you are using deployment pipelines, or you are orchestrating that with Azure Devops, or you are not using deployment pipelines?
That's a good question. Azure DevOps pipelines are orchestrating Power BI deployment pipeline. So I'm not pushing any button here to make a deployment. It's Azure DevOps who is, let's say, doing our work, who is triggering the actions inside Power BI deployment pipeline. But very important thing is that, as Kamil already mentioned, this is not the only scenario. There are other ways of deploying. Yeah, basically this is very important concept in DevOps. Yeah, there are different ways how to build your code, and there are different ways how to deploy your code. So there are different deployment tools, and basically Azure DevOps is just a robot triggering these deployment scripts for you.
Excuse me. You just mentioned that you can use tabular editor to alter the parameters for the connection in a BIM file. Can that also be orchestrated from Azure DevOps?
Yes, it can be. We will be talking about it in a few minutes.
Sorry,
Yeah, please go ahead.
question related to it. So, in this scenario, using DevOps and deployment pipelines, I see your and everything going one single pull request. So you have one single pull request.
Yes.
To push everything.
Yes, exactly.
Is it something that you, based on your experience, you would advise having one single pull request, or would be better creating one pull request for each environment?
It depends on your branching strategy, because I like to make things simple, so I like the simple branching strategies, this trunk-based approach with single main branch, and all builds and deployments are done from that single branch. If you have a more sophisticated or more complex branching strategy, for example, besides main branch, you have also release or whatever, test branch, then yes, indeed, you will need to have more than one pull request, yes. And
for environments.
Exactly. But it's important point, all mergers between, if you have more than one long-living branch, all mergers should also be done by pull request, yeah? So no manual mergers, but everything should go through pull request. Very good question.
And do you think that the deployment pipelines can fit into a more complicated scenario? Because our scenario is way more complicated.
I think so. But you should try to make things simple, yeah? Because that's why I'm not a big fan of having multiple long-living branches, because sooner or later they will be out of sync. That's why I always advise and suggest trying to create your DevOps setup based on single long-living branch, and later on, if you really need, if your scenario is so complicated, then only then create more long-living branches. But start with simple approach, single long living branch. Yeah. But yeah, it also needs to change the mindset of how you work, yeah? Because in that simple branching strategy, your team needs to work with DevOps mindset, meaning they need to push very small changes, yeah, through the pipelines very frequently, yeah? That's important thing, yeah?
Okay, Adrian, maybe let's show the pipeline. Which,
I think there is a question. There's a question.
yeah, please go ahead.
What makes sense in Power BI do you need? What permission for the workspace and what Power BI tooling settings are needed to set up the pipeline?
We have it on slides, so please wait a few minutes.
I think we prepared good slides, yeah, because there are many questions to the future slides.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's quickly check the production workspace. If our new beautiful version of report is already there, yes, it's green, and as already mentioned, the value.
Yeah, the number here is different. Size is 57 million, and we had 33, I think,
Yes.
in previous environments. So yeah, we did it. A demo without any technical issues. It doesn't happen often. Okay, maybe Adrian, let's show the pipeline which deploys content to production. It's slightly different than development.
I have two questions. So you are pushing the IX repository to the whole file, the zip file, the binary file to the repo. Yeah? What if you have more data in there? So you have bigger file, yeah, and every time you are merging with this file between branches and etc. Yeah, so there's no better scenario for this, right?
Yes, you are right. This is just for demo purposes. In more advanced scenarios or in every enterprise scenario, I would recommend to keep the model as a BIM file. So it will be separated from the report part. There will be no data there. What is a difference here in the pipeline which deploys content to production and test, because they are almost the same despite parameters. Please look at the first step. It uses different extension. This one is provided by Microsoft. It is also a wrapper for Power BI Service REST APIs, and it allows to work with Power BI deployment pipelines. So here is the place where a Power BI deployment pipeline is triggered by Azure Devops. As you can see, a few parameters, connection to the Power BI service, pipeline ID, target stage, and we can put a deployment node there. That's it.
I have a question. Because we can publish a report from the DevOps to the workspace, why we are mixing the DevOps and deployment pipelines? Can't we use only the DevOps to publish the report to the testing prod?
You can, because as mentioned, you have a couple of deployment options, and in our opinion, that one, the wrapper of Power BI deployment pipeline, is the easiest one. So we wanted to demonstrate the easiest way of deploying, but in fact, yes, you are right. There are, let's say, more advanced scenarios, yeah, because you can indeed you can do a deployment to every workspace without using Power BI deployment pipeline, yeah, because basically that task you are referring to is done here, yeah, in the dev stage, yeah. The first deployment is done directly without using Power BI deployment pipeline. So basically, yes, you could repeat the same for every environment.
What is more, Power BI deployment pipelines have some advantages. For example, you can see the deployment history in the Power BI service. You can compare environments in the Power BI service. So it depends what you'd like to achieve. Yeah? There are a couple of options, different tools, but the concept remains the same.
I think it's also important to take into account how much experience you as your team has. Yeah, if Azure DevOps is something completely new to you and you have been using only Power BI deployment pipeline, I think it can be interim option, yeah. So you can first you can use Power BI deployment pipeline and later on fully switch to Azure DevOps pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Power BI deployment pipelines can be the first step for Power BI people to start with DataOps.
I have a question. This approval process between, for example, test and production, can it be integrated with Jira?
Yes.
Somebody probably product owner.
So I was asked to repeat the questions to make it loud. So the question is about making approval in Jira, right?
I think I'm not sure if there is a native connector from Azure DevOps to Jira. For sure, there is a for ServiceNow. If not, then you need to script the communication integration using REST API or something. This is how it works. If there is no native or connector or the connector in Marketplace, but I'm pretty sure if not native connector, there should be a connector in Azure DevOps Marketplace. And yeah, that's actually a good question because in enterprise scenarios, quite often the approvals or at least deployments must be registered in kind of ITSM system like Jira or ServiceNow. Yeah? So it's a very common scenario, yeah, in enterprises. Question?
Yeah, on chat. What is the advantage of using Azure DevOps for deployment to other environments or publishing to production compared to using Power BI deployment pipelines?
For example, in scenario when you have more workspaces, more than 3. So Power BI deployment pipelines are supporting only 3 environments. If you have a more advanced, more complicated scenario, then you need to develop this thing in Azure DevOps. Yeah.
What is more, Power BI deployment pipelines are for Power BI only. Yeah, Azure DevOps is a very powerful tool. So I can imagine a scenario that the whole company is using Azure DevOps for deploying all the solutions, not only Power BI. So using Azure DevOps will make the approach consistent.
For example, together with maybe your scenario, you want to deploy not only Power BI reports, but other kinds of assets. Once I heard that it is possible to automate deployments of ADF, yeah? Kamil, do you know something about that? I'm joking, but yeah. In fact, you can combine deployments of different solutions using Azure DevOps, which you cannot do using solely Power BI deployment pipelines, yeah?
Is it like that you don't need a premium version if you're using Azure DevOps? You can do the pro account?
Yes, it's about the question is about when we need a Power BI premium license. Power BI premium license in that scenario is required due to Power BI deployment pipeline. So getting rid of Power BI deployment pipelines will make it possible to implement it without Power BI premium, but I'm not sure if this is a big benefit. For enterprise scale, Power BI Premium, I think, is already a must. Power BI Premium per user or Power BI Premium capacity, yeah, they work both the same in that context. Because if you have some big data models, as I said, probably we will use BIM file to deploy data models. We will need to use XMLI endpoint. And still, we need Power BI Premium for that purpose.
Okay, so maybe let's run through the slides because we are running out of time.
Maybe it's important to say that you need premium per user to use this feature, or maybe premium per capacity.
They work. They both work. Yeah, it can be Power BI Premium per user or premium capacity.
Just want to add that it is possible to operate with Power BI Pro and use Azure DevOps. Yeah, so
Yeah.
for enterprise level, yes, I agree, it's premium is necessary, but for smaller organizations, it all boils down to how much it's going to cost you. You can have your bin file in form of analysis services, and then Pro for every user in the company. and it's still going to be cheaper if the organization is small enough, but still have the same benefits of control version and automated deployment.
Yes, that's very good point. But in practice and from my experience, for this simple part, for self-service scenario, what we are presenting here, it's probably an overkill. Yeah. For self-service, if a user uses OneDrive as a version control for Power BI file and Power BI app as production and workspace as development, it's really great, and it doesn't happen often in practice.
So let's run through once again. Let's really run through the building blocks of demo environment.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't show you how to set up the whole environment and make it working because it will be a good topic for the whole day probably. Not because of the complexity, but the number of things you need to configure and create. So probably we are not going through all the details. You will get slides so you can read it. But there were some questions about this setup. So once again, free Power BI workspaces with premium per user license. Let's go to the next slide. For Azure DevOps, we use two extensions from the marketplace to make things easier. Once again, you can replace those extensions with REST API calls. What is very, very important, we use service principle for credentials to make Azure DevOps connecting to the Power BI service. And in the next slide, we have required permissions. I will focus on that because there was a question related to that topic. For service principal, we need to create it in Azure Active Directory. We need add this service principal to some security group. Then, on Power BI service side, in Power BI tenant settings, we need to allow service principal to run REST APIs. Yeah, there is a specific tenant setting for that purpose. There we add a group, security group mentioned before, to make service principal running the REST APIs. At workspace level, service principal has to have at least member permissions. It was strange for me. I thought that contributor should be enough, but not. It should be at least member. For deployment pipelines, the service principal needs admin privileges. This is because this is the only access level that can be applied in deployment pipelines. And for a data source created on the on-premises data gateway, the service principal has to have at least user permissions to bind the data set to a gateway.
Okay, so as mentioned, it was quite simple demo. There are more advanced scenarios, so let's quickly think what more we can do, and the most important thing, what Microsoft can do for us more, yeah? Basically, a lot of these things was already asked, so yes, for sure, the first improvements, first extension to the demo we showed would be to keep data models, to take them out from the PBX file to text files, yeah? And here we have a couple of options. Tabular editor, already mentioned, tabular editor is one of them. Thanks to tabular editor, you can, let's say, decompile the data model part of the Power BI PBX file into folder structure with JSON files and keep them in Git repository.
Yeah, let's stop for a while here, because there was a question about running tabular editor with Azure DevOps. tabular editor can be treated as a console tool, yeah? You can run data models deployments with a console command. So it's something you can easily do with Azure DevOps. Obviously, you need to install tabular editor on a machine where agents, Azure DevOps agents are running, and then you just run a command to deploy a Beam file to the Power BI workspace.
One more thing, you shouldn't be afraid of this installation, because I have seen example scenarios where this installation is done as the first step of the deployment pipeline. So you can even make use of Microsoft hosted agent. Yeah, it's that simple. It's one liner to install tabular editor, yeah, from the command line. It's pretty simple, yeah. Power BI tools, yeah, the tool developed by community, but appreciated and well recognized by Microsoft. It can act similarly to tabular editor. Power BI tools is a command line tool, yeah. So using that, you also can firstly decompile a PBX file to JSON files, put it into Git repository, and later on using command line commands, yeah, you can compile it back to, it depends on what scenario, yeah, but you have an options to compile it back to PBX file, PB8 or Beam file, yeah, and deploy it from here. So in that scenario, because in our very simple demo, the build pipeline was really super simple because it was just uploading, yeah, the binary file from the Git repo into the Azure DevOps services, and in those scenarios, tabular editor or Power BI tools, there would be a real, let's say, a compilation, a real build process, of course, done from command line, yeah.
Yeah, what is more, tabular editor can be used to do some checks, verification on our data model. We can run best practices analyzer to check if the model is proper. Yeah, we can write our own rules for that, or get some from the community.
In DevOps, one of the very important principles is test automation. As I mentioned in DataOps, yeah, testing data is for sure more complicated than just testing code, work done by software engineers. I don't want to say their work is easier than ours, but maybe it is. For sure, in regards to test automation, Kamil mentioned some test automation scenarios for data models. For sure, it will be hard to fully automate testing for the, let's say, visual part of the reports, yeah? So important thing in DevOps, you shouldn't expect, especially in DataOps scenarios, you shouldn't expect full automation, that all the tests can be done fully automatically. Because, you know, when you are developing application, you expect that, yeah? This is your target, yeah?
Have you seen anywhere, is it possible to apply some maybe best practices report? So let's say a script that counts the number of visuals per page or something per section that, you know.
I haven't seen such a scenario.
To be honest, I didn't see such a solution. It will, maybe it is possible, but you need to decompile PBX file, get report metadata. You know, there are tools who, what they can, for example, get metadata, visuals metadata, and save it to, for example, CSV file. So probably it's doable, but it will be hard.
Something is coming, so register for build.
I was sure somebody is going to say that, yeah? So thank you, Kamil.
One more thing about the data verification. It's also not very easy, but I think it is possible. Let me mention that Power BI service offers a REST API to call DAX queries against datasets. So you can easily query data model from Azure DevOps and, for example, compare it with some data source. Yeah? Run SQL statement on source data, run DAX query on the data model, and compare the results to have some basic data checks.
Already mentioned more sophisticated branching strategies, and once again, you can replace the deployment Power BI deployment pipelines, let's say, with different deployment engine or deployment tool, yeah, REST API or XML endpoint, yeah. And finally, yeah, we have only 3 minutes. Microsoft already put TMDL, the new language, in public preview. It's a new language, YAML-based, the new way, finally, the text-driven way of defining and developing your data models.
Does it apply to analytics as well, or on Power BI?
I think both.
Yeah, they have the same engine, so I think for both.
Microsoft is going to prepare a Visual Studio Code extension supporting this new language. We haven't tried that, but Power BI tools, the community tool, already is supporting that language. Yeah. And
Final thought, yeah. What Microsoft is going to release does not make the session irrelevant. I think it makes it even more relevant. Probably something more will be released than just TMDL. I expect that some tools to compare visuals, the report part, to track it as a text files. Maybe it will be possible. So the general concept of applying DataOps for Power BI will become more important and I hope even simpler.
I think you should think about DevOps process like a building from blocks. Yeah, you have a deployment engine, build engine, and you can replace the part of the process with different tool, different solution. Yeah, in the demo we just showed, we are using binary file in the repo. So once this language is available, I guess that one will be the first and the most important improvement for your DevOps setup, for your Power BI environment. But it doesn't mean that you need to throw away everything, yeah? DevOps is like building from blocks, yeah? I think we'll let you to just read those points because we have only 1 minute and maybe there are some final questions.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So yeah, my question is, do you think that DataOps or DevOps is now becoming a must-have skill for Power BI development?
It's a hard question. It depends on the scenario, on the scale of organization. For small companies, as I said before, probably it will be an overkill. For business users, for sure. BI professionals, yeah, probably should have at least some knowledge on DevOps. But it doesn't have to be a Power BI person who designs the whole process, implements tools and services, yeah?
I think this is super good question. If you ask about data engineer, I would say yes. DevOps, DataOps things are getting more and more popular. I'm a bit surprised that I think during this conference there was no session about DataOps itself. It was a bit surprise to me, but I'm pretty sure next year there will be at least one.
Again, as you said, it all depends on the size of your project, yeah? Because if you have like a pretty big project and quite amount of people in the teams, yeah? So you might have like that completely separate one or maybe two positions like DevOps engineers, yeah? They will prepare everything for you to automate those things. You don't have to worry about this, yeah?
But yeah, basically, I have seen such a project when, you know, it's not the duty of Power BI guys, data engineer guys. It's a DevOps guy who's building a DevOps setup for a data engineering team. That's not your scenario, yeah?
Yeah, as Adrian was playing different roles, he, as a Power BI developer, just did Power BI development and pushed the change, the report to the repo, and that's it.
Are there more questions? Because we are out of time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.